We need that.
Okay, we should be live. Hello there, everybody. Welcome to our latest Ahsoka reaction. This is for episode 3, the Time to Fly. That's what it's called. Time to Fly. Thanks for watching with us. If you are just joining us for the first time this week, we are going to run through kind of our review that you usually see from us, and then we'll get into your guys' questions. So if you have some questions, send them in, and we will answer them as soon as we can get to them. This first part will be about 10 minutes, 15 minutes long. All right. So let's start out, Sanak, with the highlights of this episode. This was a short, very brief, compact episode. And ultimately, it focused mostly on Ahsoka and Sabine's relationship. And we kind of talked a lot about that in predictions. But we did have a very, very cool dogfight in this episode. We also had the Hera scene that we had been seeing in the trailers with Mon Mothma. So, talk about some of your highlights first before we dive into some of the deeper character stuff from this episode.
Honestly, I think one of the highlights was actually the episode title, "Time to Fly." It just felt very like episode 9, like, oh, they fly now. Oh yeah, they fly now, right? It kind of felt like that energy. It felt silly already, right? So I already kind of felt primed for something to be just action and fun and like a blitz to the end, and it was. I mean, it started off a little bit more meditative with all the Ahsoka and Hera stuff. Highlight for me there was them still playing this whole uncertainty of like, okay, does she really have it or not? And the way she's proceeding about it is pretty humorous. She's like, I'll get you next time, this round is yours, and all that. Like, there's a levity, even though it's like a subject matter of like, is she or is she not force sensitive or able to do something? They've been very particular with their word choice, and it's not there. And I thought the way they handled it was well done. But in the whole thematic title of like time to fly, to take that leap and all that, I was like, it's not really there. It's kind of silly that, we're still edging like, oh, are we going this way? Are we going that way? Like, that's kind of how this show has been with that whole like plot development. But what really was funny for me and a massive highlight was what Ahsoka does in the dogfight. Like, this was definitely very classically inspired, and New Hope shots were definitely there. Whereas like we seen in the premiere, we saw a little bit more Return of the Jedi with the Rebel fleet and all that. So I just found it very cool to see Ahsoka bring out something more traditionally Ahsoka. I mean, this is the Ahsoka that we know from the Clone Wars that we met when she was like, what, 14 years old, a prodigy, but also crazed in the head, right? And paired with someone even crazier and just as young, right? So I felt a lot of that energy from Ahsoka, a lot of quips and stuff like that. And that felt like the ultimate peak. Like, yeah, she's just gonna go outside with like mag boots on, deflect laser blasts, and buy Sabine time. I was like, that's exactly like the ATTE, like climbing on over onto like the rocks and all that, making the assault. It felt like that. It felt very Clone Warsy. It felt like this was an episode to remind me of like, hey, this is the Ahsoka that I grew up with. This is the one that was once there, and I think it also plays a pretty pivotal point where she kind of has to give in to, like Sabine's silly, dumb ideas, like even something as simple as like preset for the gun rack, right? She's like, why is it gone now? She's like, I don't need it, right? Zoka's been playing defense. She's been playing stoicism. She's been doing all these things. But then when she like goes out and she finally lets, Sabine kind of control the dogfight, work in tandem, then you realize what was so exciting and fun about Ahsoka. She would do something absolutely ballsy and just out of the world in the Clone Wars, and it worked because of her attitude or the way she carried herself, and it just felt like that flick was finally switched on for her, whereas everyone else was like, having a little bit of fun here and there. And I was like, yes, she's back. That's the Ahsoka I saw back in 2008 for me, right? So that was a big, big highlight. So that was the capper for me of the episode, just seeing how silly it was. And, we also got small silly things like seeing a Jason cameo with a silly little bit of green hair still. Kazuto's dad, the senator, is but he's a silly guy. Obviously, his father is, and that was a highlight to see that whole Senate politicking happen here and there, more classically Star Wars as opposed to Andor. It felt like a lot of things were lighter, and because it's paced so well, we still feel the impact, but we don't let it linger and be like, well, maybe that could have lasted a little longer, had more gravitas. It's just it's Clone Wars, and it felt silly like that, and I was very just happy what's going on with that, with the whole episode.
Yeah, I completely agree about that. I mean, there was a lot of episode 4 stuff, even the training sequence with the blast shield down, and she literally says the exact same line Luke says with the blast shield down. How am I supposed to fight? Uh, that exact stuff. Like there's a lot of parallels, obviously, there to a wise older mentor teaching older Jedi student who knows nothing about life how to possibly connect with the Force. Uh, and I think there's a lot of that here that obviously plays the Sabine Force sensitivity thing. I feel like I'm pretty sold on it now. We're gonna see her at the end of the episode, episode 7, 8, just kind of give this big Force power push, and then it'll defy everybody's expectations in terms of the characters in the show, not ours. But I think it's coming. It's not the worst thing in the world if they're able to explain it away, or really, give these hints of these moments. Just the fact being Mandalorian, I kind of hoped she wasn't Force sensitive, just because there are warrior race people who were able to compete with the Jedi without the Force. And so, and Hu Yang, even in this episode, indicates that there were very, very few Mandalorians who ever possessed Force sensitivity. So there's a lot of that type of stuff that I think will be interesting to track throughout the show. But overall, I did appreciate the dynamic. We still really don't get much of an insight into like what happened between the two of them, and I was surprised about that, especially because this episode does so much building towards what is the conflict that they're currently facing in the relationship. I guess that's the next section we're going to talk about here. But other highlights for me by far was the Ahsoka in space during the dogfight. I know some people will probably get on here and berate that scene. Oh, the physics, and stop with that. Like this is Clone Wars Rebels, like animation fantasy brought into live action. She's a character that a lot of people have been complaining about. Oh, she's too stoic, she's too this, she's too that. And to me, that's been so far, it's a justifiable criticism. I think we haven't really seen anything from her that indicates like I am even the exact same kind of Rebels version of Ahsoka, but we've also not had much story for her. So I was expecting this show to give us that. And the first 2 episodes were very Sabine heavy. I'm glad these last 2, or today's, excuse me, focused on Ahsoka, and like you get to see her smile and those types of moments when she's fighting, kind of enjoying it. That type of stuff is very Ahsoka, and I thought we got that. But that dogfight was awesome. I loved it. Pergil, and this episode continues the run of Ahsoka looking fantastic as a show with its VFX. Like Mandalorian had its moments where it would look great and then kind of dropped in season 3, and we'd see it in the middle episodes, and then it'd go back up for the finale. And this still looks fantastic. This is a sequence that could have easily been kind of phoned in for a shorter episode, and I'm glad we didn't get that. More mystery. I love the Hera versus the New Republic type thing. It's already foreshadowing ultimately the demilitarization type thing, the fear of warmongering and bringing about a second war that the New Republic has carried all the way into the sequels, and kind of it's a Legends-esque idea of like, what's the fine line between creating peace and ignoring what's out there. And although the New Republic is on the warpath a bit more in Legends for a bit longer, here we get to see those early seeds of like absurd optimism that is just drowning this government and ultimately will cause it to fail. I really liked all that, but I started to get into the Ahsoka Hera, Hera Sabine relationship earlier. Let's transition into that again, because this was the focus of this episode. This was the main reason for these 32-ish minutes to exist, was for that relationship. And I did find the ending with Baylan kind of like kind of abrupt. I thought it ended all right, but that just kind of came out of nowhere. It's teasing what's going to be in the next episode. I think when Sabine and Ahsoka landed, I was kind of like, where are they going to end this? Because it seems like there's another 30 minutes in this episode. And so in that sense, I don't know about the structure of this episode as a whole. I think in general, as a package, it was well paced for its short length. But as a package, I think when you look at it beat by beat with story elements, it could have and probably should have been longer. But besides that, we do get 2 or 3 very nice Ahsoka and Sabine scenes. So to kind of touch on some of your favorite little pieces of information that we gleaned out of their relationship there, and some of the things that make you look forward to their dynamic here in the future.
I mean, the biggest thing that I think everyone will say is, does she or does she not have force sensitivity? Why are Huyang and Ahsoka being so cryptic about it? And that'll be everyone's first impulse. I think what is very interesting for me is that Sabine from the start has been like committed. She's been like, I'm giving you everything that I have, and that does finally unlock Ahsoka to be a little bit more relaxed, sillier, but also just realize you can operate like that. Not everything has to be stoic, not locked in like that. So I appreciated that detail from Sabine, that she's like Ahsoka. I'm gonna give it my all, right? Like that's always been Sabine. I think when we look at these first 2 episodes, when people are introduced to her, they'll be looking at her like, ah, she's a punk rebel. She's just gonna do whatever she wants and all that. But she's also very hardworking and dedicated. She's often the mission planner, explosive specialist, all these different things when she's part of the Ghost Crew with rebels. And obviously, not everyone knows that. And I think this is definitely an episode to show like she has a commitment. She has this willingness of working in tandem with people. She's proven to work very well with multiple people in a unit. And you know, telling Ahsoka, I'm gonna give everything I have already kind of primes Ahsoka to be like, okay, I need to like work with her here, right? And I think she realized that when she means like I need to work with her, it's like I need to do that. I don't need to like train her per se. I need to make her connect and make myself connect her. And I thought that was a really nice touch. It's a very subtle thing at the beginning, but I felt like a very nice through line to the end there. Um, Obviously, going back to the whole does she or does she not have it, I'm gonna save what I'm thinking for predictions, so I hope you guys will come when that video comes out. But I will say, I think this is very much like Filoni threading the line and kind of creating this new concept and our understanding of the Force. I don't think ultimately she is Force sensitive. I don't think she could ever be the character that she is without her temperament too, right? Like she can have her deep, super serious moments, but she's Sabine. She's everything and everywhere all at once, right? She's basically the Star Wars version of that. She's anything she does is a creative chaos, and with that, more reserved, controlled sort of version of her, I think even if she got the Force, I don't think I'd really love the character as much. I like her because she's who she is. She's dealt with her past. Now this is the one thing to provide her a future. So yeah, obviously development will happen. I just don't want it to be like, oh, she becomes like a stoic, almost Jedi, and she's like Ezra in a way when he has to be very serious and calm. I wouldn't want that. But I think Ahsoka sees that there's something about Sabine that lets her have an effect on the Force without it naturally being a talent for her. I know you're saying the Huyang beat of like not many Mandalorians have also had that either, right? In the Force sensitivity. I think they're trying to like do a little bit of a red herring there and be like, oh, so maybe that means Sabine has it. She doesn't, but she does. And that's kind of where I want to leave it at because I have a very specific example that relates to something else that a lot of people can relate to and understand immediately about where I think Sabine is in the Force. But I think yeah, Ahsoka sees something there. She just doesn't know exactly what it is, or else she wouldn't have, taken on the very unconventional, unorthodox Padawan like Hu Yang says, right? With Sabine. So I think all that was quite cool. I think another also very interesting thing about Ahsoka so far right now is just this constant like back and forth with her and Hu Yang about following the Jedi principles, directives, tactics, as opposed to Ahsoka being like just stay closer, do what I say, all this and that. And I think it'll be very interesting to see maybe like Hu Yang be like almost a bit of an impetus with Ahsoka and Sabine and everyone all together again to maybe push Ahsoka to pick up on some of the more Clone Wars esque qualities and stuff like that. I can see Hu Yang be like, I remember that mission with you taking those younglings, right? That Ahsoka is what we need here. We don't need your, seriousness, resistance blocking off. And we need you to understand, yeah, the Jedi are no more. The Jedi fell after a millennia, but there are still some good things you, as a survivor, you who's still been committed to the light, can pull and take on your own. And I don't know if that means she becomes a Jedi. I don't really want that for her, but I think she'll become as close as ever. And she even is now. So I really like that dynamic. Um, yeah, I just really liked everything that was done on the ship because that was where the meat of it was. And people can easily forget all that because we see Space Ahsoka flying around, dog fights and all that, and the Hera and the Mon Mothma politicking and bickering, right? This is something that just feels like you can blink and miss it, but it's actually really well made, paced, and still pretty dense.
Yeah, I agree with that point. Again, to echo, like I thought the package here was stronger than it should have been for the runtime. I think my only problem with the overall structure was the ending and like the way it kind of abruptly halts the middle of a story that probably would have been like 1 hour long episode, but they're going to split it into two 30-minute and maybe 38, 39, 40-minute episodes. And that's fine. If the show is great by the end, that doesn't really matter how long the episodes are. And I kind of feel the same way about Sabine's force sensitivity in general. Like at this point, we've all made such a big deal about, oh gosh, is she going to be force sensitive? How is this going to break? Literally Dave Filoni's story from Star Wars Rebels, right? Like the same guy who wrote that is writing this. I personally, as long as it's a good story, I don't care if she's force sensitive or not. I just don't want it to become a superpower. Like I don't want her to be this Mandalorian, amazing Mandalorian warrior who all of a sudden discovers, oh wow, I'm 30 years old and I have force sensitivity. Now I can just like conquer the world. I'm so powerful, nobody can beat me. I don't want it to be like that. If it's some type of kind of enhancement, almost Leia-esque with like the way she's more able to, in her early days before she's trained by Luke, kind of just feel things and just get that kind of that hint into the future, see things before they happen, enhance her battle skills. I mean, it could be just a basic high midichlorian count trait that Mandalorians have, right? There's a lot of examples to where she could be force sensitive, but doesn't have to have telekinesis or jump really high or do all these things. And we've seen the opposite also work in Legends. I think it does become a little absurd, but Corran Horn's one of my favorite characters in Legends, and he doesn't realize he's force sensitive till he's like 31 or something like that. So it can work, but I get afraid that it becomes a superpower, but I feel like in other people's hands it would. And Dave Filoni's, I trust him to do what's best for his group of characters in his story. And I think that's the main thing, that even if she does follow through with all of the warnings that the show is trying to throw at us, whether they're red herrings or actual truths, I do feel that I trust whatever he's going for there. But in general, again, to echo all of your points about the relationship between the two of them, it's built up very nicely in this. Again, I want more about why they separated in the first place. I think it seems intentionally done to confuse us fans of Rebels. Like
Yeah.
it's a confusing plot point for all of us who have watched Rebels and all of us who haven't watched Rebels. So you're not missing anything there if you haven't seen Rebels with with what happened between Ahsoka and Sabine, because we don't know. But I'm still waiting for that, and maybe that will be further than the next episode. Most of my predictions from last week, I feel like we're episode 4 predictions now, because I think we're going to get the Baylan fight next episode. We're going to get the probably Shin versus Sabine rematch. We're going to get the Marrok fight with Ahsoka possibly in that forest. There's going to be a lot of stuff that goes down next episode. I think it's going to be pretty epic. But their relationship here, at least the kind of establishing of a rapport, the trust, you have that one shot where you see Ahsoka go from stone-faced to a little bit more relaxed, and she tells Sabine, call it. You call the shots, I'll fly. And that was a nice moment. And ultimately, that leads her to jumping out of the ship and fighting the starfighters because she trusts Sabine will get her. And I think overall, I loved that ultimate progression in their dynamic. So all great stuff for this week's episode, if not, an epic barn burner of lore, but next week very well could be. So that's going to wrap up our review. Now we'll go to your guys' questions. So all of you watching, make sure you send in your questions if you have any questions or just comments, your reviews. You want to send us in your thoughts on the episode. Maybe you hated it. Maybe you completely disagree with something we said, or maybe you completely agree with what we said and you have another point or a prediction you want to share. Anything that you want to be featured here on the show, send it into the chat and we will try to feature it, barring time. We're going to go about an hour and a half. So we've gone about 20 minutes here so far. So we're looking at about 8:30-ish p.m. Pacific, so 11:30 Eastern. Send in your questions. And the first one we have here is from Revan Reborn. It says, "Hey, Star Wars lads, episode 3 was great. How do you feel? How did it feel seeing Senator Xiono again, Kazuto Xiono's father? I thought it was a cool touch. Again, when Dave Filoni brings in Canon, I saw an interview with him the other day talking about, George's mindset on Legends and how he was kind of raised up in the whole world of only the movies and shows are canon, and it doesn't really matter what happens over the rest of the stuff, even though Senator Xiono is from an animated show. It's still nice to see one that Dave didn't write be referenced and used like a Saw Gerrera-esque character, where you bring in characters that fit the story and you make them connect the world. And it's just a nice little treat for fans. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I really like it. To your point there, even though Filoni may have grew up with the very orthodox, what Lucas directly made or had a direct hand in instead of just approvals, if has creative work inserted, right? I think that's what he's like. Yeah, that's the gospel. That's what we play by. Sure, he does all those things. However, he also does this thing where he's very Legends-esque. It feels like he's burning to have his own like stories and heritage and lineage, right? Like a great example there is like that one scene with Hera and Jason, and Jason's like, I want to be a Jedi like Auntie Sabine, and Hera smiles and then she like looks off for a second and she's obviously like remembering Canon there, right? And it's like, oh man, like he wants to have this past Jedi possibly having a way of connecting to his son and continuing on. Possibly Filoni still really wants to do that into like the sequel era with like another descendant, right? He wants to create his own sort of Force family here. He likes playing with his toys and he wants these toys to be as bombastic and as incredible as possible. But at the same time, he also wants to be like, hey, I want to still point out that canon is not the same as Legends. Legends, we can distrust an Imperial, but they do one good thing, and yeah, we're fine. They're on our side forever until it's like a very specific betrayal. Here, we're seeing the consequences of stuff that was showed in the Mandalorian season 3 in the 3rd episode, where Gideon's old like crew member is able to take Dr. Pershing and she's able to trap him and snare him and then keep Imperial secrets safe. So very clearly you can see that someone who's been rehabilitated and is able to like blend in with other Imperials just to talk about stuff like cookies and stuff like that, all those rations back in the day, and then still be able to do that only continue here in Ahsoka. This is a group of people who just probably said, yep, sure, it's our job. If the Empire is gone but the Republic's playing, sure. And then they all attack Hera and Ahsoka last episode. So seeing, another layer to that of someone who, almost kind of played it like a Vietnam situation, but going to Canada. Maybe that's what Kazuto's dad did, right? Maybe when Hera calls him out, she's coming with fire. It's wild to me, like that she's with the Chancellor there. I don't care if she's like worked with her before. That was the rebellion. This is the New Republic. It's just shocking to me that she like snaps it and like drags him along to forcibly give that answer. But that is the difference, right? We still have those people on the side playing like, oh, the sequel story of like, nothing will go wrong, and then Mandalorian season 3 episode, there's nothing to worry about. Like we shouldn't really, go off of false leads. But then you also have someone who's like the senator who has his own experiences of like, not maybe having the full respect to Hera and all the previous struggles, but he is still a good politician. Clearly, if he's going to be sticking around until the Star of Resistance and all these different things, he, in some ways, being critical, being practical, that's a very different thing. He's not someone who just is giving stuff to our heroes just because situation demands it. And I really like that. And I like that he has his deficiencies called out. It's that layered and just immediate setup for this character that Legends doesn't really ever have unless you get to like 100 pages with that character. That's when you feel that same richness that I felt in 30 seconds with his appearance. And I think that's where Filoni really understands, these are my play toys. This is Star Wars. It's my sandbox. But I want to bring the best qualities of everything past, present, and future to create something new here. And the senator was exactly that to me. He was someone who's just not good. He's not bad. He's just a hard-working man who's critical. And I really like that. And I like the threads, the sequels with the other senators being so optimistic, like you said. But seeing the senator, seeing his role like that felt sharp. And I can definitely see even more now. Like Kazuto is this crazed, unhinged boy stuck in a man's body that is the Star Wars resistance, right? So it makes a lot more sense when you have a father like this that feels controlling and, in the name of practicality and all that jazz,
Right. Yeah. I wanted to see the Grand Senator speak also, but apparently the Grand was the only one who's going to get to talk in this episode. No, but yeah, I agree. I mean, it's nice to have those layers to the Senate. And we do get that side a little later in Legends as we go closer to the new Jedi Order and ultimately kind of the splintering of the New Republic and then the Fel Dynasty with the Empire, all that type of stuff. But here it is. Claudia Gray really established it well in Bloodline, the different factions within the Senate, the different political parties, the way people see different sides of the same conflict, but ultimately everybody's kind of blind to the same threat. And I thought this scene did a really nice job of tying all that in. I remember I think in that same interview, Dave Filoni said that he appreciated where George was coming from with, ignoring everything, but he also kind of felt as a fan himself, he didn't want to completely ignore the rest of the lore that everybody else put their time into, which is, I think, something we all really appreciate about Dave Filoni's work on Star Wars. He just only seems to take that George Lucas approach when it comes to characters he created, like Canon or Ahsoka. But hopefully we'll see less retconning in this and more just continued pushes at expansion. I really believe that. I think Senator Ziono is another great example of tying in the world. Haichiko says, who is Marrok? Ezra, a clone from Luke's hand? Star Killer, which I know we have a question down a bit lower. And there's been a lot of theories about Marrok, and honestly, I don't know. I think he is going to be. I feel like he's going to be somebody, right? Like they're doing too much of the garbled voice, the masked face. Obviously, if he was just some random Inquisitor, he would have probably died last episode. So I feel like he's going to be somebody. I don't personally love the idea of it being Ezra. I know that's that's one of the common theories, and most people, I feel like, biggest theory is that it's Star Killer in some way. That's been a theory before the show even started. Now it's a theory because Sam Witwer has been found in the credits, and it would be a cool reveal. Okay. I'm of two minds about this. I don't want to go on forever on this topic. I would, out of those three options, I'd prefer it to be a clone of Luke and just be kind of a crazy reveal, or a clone of Ezra, something like that. One of those would be my preference if you're going to copy the clone plot point. It being Ezra kind of removes that mystery because we still don't know how the Imperials are contacting Thrawn. We don't know how people are talking to him. We don't know if it this episode even pushes it further to make it sound like it's just blind belief that he's out there, that like they're so desperate they're just trying to rally for a figurehead, which I kind of like that idea a little better than like Thrawn's been secretly randomly communicating with certain people but not everybody else, and he like partially cares about the Empire but he also doesn't seem to really care at all about other people in the Empire. So he's like, yeah, I'll FaceTime Pelion every once in a while, but I'm not going to talk to Gideon. Like that guy, no, he's not fun. So yeah, I feel like if Ezra was suddenly back and like didn't get in contact with anyone and just went straight to helping manufacture hyperdrive engines to find Thrawn, like how did Ezra get back? First of all, did he ride a Purrgil back? So I don't know. There's a lot of things to me that just make it a little too wild for it to be directly Ezra. Clone of Ezra? Sure, let's do that. But with Starkiller, unless this character continues going, like I feel like that would be a waste of Starkiller, right? Like I know a lot of people out there just want Starkiller so bad, but Starkiller was a character who for one game had a pretty solid amount of story and was beloved for not just his powers, but he had an emotional depth to him that Sam Witwer provided through just one crazy action game. So I wouldn't want the Starkiller character wasted on a character who's trying to be hidden in the background right now, ultimately to his reveal. And then if he's revealed and then just dies, like I feel like that would be a waste. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on all of those theories?
I mean, I want to start with the Starkiller one. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Starkiller, but I definitely appreciate a lot more Starkiller in the first Force Unleashed versus Starkiller in the second one. I don't think the cloning and everything makes sense. I don't think it lines up with what we're introducing Thrawn even, or just all the other things, or Spectre of the Past, all that stuff, right? It just doesn't sit right with me. However, I will say, having Sam Witwer come back would be very cool as that character. But then I think it kind of comes into the question of like, okay, well, if you're gonna bring him back as Starkiller, we want to see his face. We don't want to just see like the mask, right? And if the mask comes off, right, because like Ahsoka like chops off the front of his mask, and he's like permanently scarred, and you're like, oh my god, that's Starkiller. I don't know. I'd feel like that's what he's sunk to. He's a Inquisitor with rusted armor that just feels like he's been the third rate behind Shin, right? Shin and Baylan's like, power in this, dark sider user, more classically dark side user, I don't know, pyramid of power or something, this organization, this almost like pseudo civilization that and bureaucracy that they're all trying to form with each other, despite having very different connections with Thrawn. I just feel it's very demeaning to that character. I don't think he should have been like his family crest was the connection to the rebellion symbol. I can't say even Sabine's Phoenix being converted is much better. I just think it's a lot more reasonable. It's like those little details that made him who he is just don't fit. He's not going to be born in Kashyyyk to a Jedi who's already had this son who's like what 3 or 4 years old. I mean, I know it's like after episode 3, but still, I don't love that concept. Because then I'd rather have Quinlan there. I wouldn't really want his father there. He was just a video game character.
And
all
the
his stuff
Vader
with Juno.
relationship too.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
we haven't seen
exactly.
that. That's like the most important part of the character is the connection with Vader.
I mean, if you really want to like throw it at us and be like, okay, this is the end of a story, but get the whole thing here in like a mini series or like a book or something. Sure, but that still is not the same level of seeing Sam Witwer's face, being able to customize a character, having him be so intrinsically tied to a dark side story, one of the most, if not the most important dark side user, being so tied into the early rebellion. Sacrificing himself is such an important part of his story. That's his first like real choice for his own. He's been backstabbed. He's been literally stabbed and left for dead and all these different things. But doing something for his own choice to actually be good, to not be whatever Vader has molded him and convinces him that he is, that I felt that was very powerful. I'm not going to even get into the second one. That's just like, whatever, okay. And I guess if the dark side story happens, another clone comes out, just like the first game. It's like, I forget about it. That's just gaming. yeah. So Star Killer for me, you bring him to be a central role, right? You bring him to be like the place of a Baylan. That's honestly what I would say, right? Because then that would make that fight, that duel, very interesting. Because if we do something with World Between Worlds, we do something about like being stuck in a Force vision when they're like in comas or something, then you could have the Ahsoka stuff intertwined with, you know, Vader's apprentice versus Anakin's apprentice. That would be great. That I would totally cheer for, because that makes me really care about that character instead of just feeling like he's just some overpowered mess. He feels like he has a rich connection thematically to the story of Star Wars here with the Skywalkers. Right now, if you were going to put him in that situation with how he's felt, no, you depowered him, you put him behind a mask, give him a cool voice. I'm not gonna lie, but that's about it, and I don't want that for that character. And I guess when we look at Ezra, nah, nah. I think that if it is a clone of Ezra or a clone of Luke, that already makes things too complicated because we've already seen the madness of the clones in Thrawn trilogy. You know, we haven't really had anything to show like even a dark side user like Vader with all his resources cloning a Star Killer. We haven't seen anything or even had a reference to the capability really being there. It feels like something that through Sith magic, the Sith Eternal, all these crazy things happening on Exegol, that's where it happens, right? And that takes decades for it to happen. So no, I don't want it to be a clone of Luke either, because then are we bringing Sparty clonings? Are we bringing Isal Mari? Like that's just too complicated. How are if like people able to clone Force sensitives without any repercussion from the Force? The Force is alive, right? Of course, the Force would be like, all right, you know, I'm going to screw him up for you, right? So no, I absolutely despise that. I just saw MCT Consortium says, what if Marrok is related to the Knights of Ren? I would be more open to that if it's actually like Ren and maybe him being so like over the top with like a scarred body and just being so macho and gray hair, trying to be like super 90s cool and all that. Then yeah, if this is like he goes from that and then he feels like freed and like, you know, evolved into this character to be like that, sure, but it doesn't really make sense to me because we've already seen Knights of Ren in the comics during the original trilogy era, and for him to just be like, this is my side gig here, you know, let me get into this, I don't see that. And lastly, Ezra, no, I mean the whole point is to get to see Ezra, to find him and then be surprised that what we see here is not what we expected. If he comes as like a dark side user, cool, sure, but it should have some real weight and meaning instead of being like he's third place to some young dark Jedi girl to some master that we don't really understand his full power yet. You know, I would really not like any of that. And the idea of it being like someone we know, that's very valid. I mean, definitely. I know a lot of people were saying, what if it's just Barris, or what if it's like the Inquisitor from Malachor? Those still feel like stronger possibilities to me than these three, unfortunately, just because those feel like some stories have already been written and you can keep it relatively simple and therefore keep Marrok at like a bottom tier of this fledgling imperial dark side user bureaucracy and group aiming to, you know, bring back Thrawn. So no, I just personally, I think it's just going to be some random dude and it's just going to be another Inquisitor. I think it's just that simple. It's just going to be, you know, an interesting exploration of like what really happened in Inquisitors. They didn't simply just disappear, right? Maybe they were shut down. Maybe, you know, they were persecuted. Maybe they're left to fend on their own. And, you know, I don't know. I feel like that's a lot more grounded and reasonable of a story as opposed to just being it's someone we know. And it's because once someone we know appears and is underneath that mask, then all of a sudden the power balances would shift. And I don't think that's really anything in place, right? So that's just me. That's just me. I guess our next question is from that funky monkey, huh?
Let me respond to that too, because I kind of disagree. I do think that it's going to be somebody we know. I think it's too much of like too many apparatics in the voice. Like it's just he's trying too hard to hide it. I just don't think it's going to be one of these characters. I think this, to me, the Ezra clone thing is like, more I think about it, a nice nod to, well, what's going on in general in the Sith Eternal and that type of stuff, and what we've seen from the Mandalorian already with the Thrawn trilogy. And instead of it being a big finale twist like it is in The Last Command, here it could be just kind of a initial shock that, oh my god, Ezra turned to the dark side. It's used as a plot device. And if we do get that battle in the next episode, and it's Ahsoka kills Marrok, and then you see on the ground kind of inside the cave-esque from Empire Strikes Back, like the head of of Ezra, right? That could be a shock to the characters. That could be something that separates Sabine and Ahsoka even further. That could be really interesting. But I do think, I don't know if where I agree with you though is I feel like Marrok is, if he's a character that's too big, it shifts the story to where you don't really like need this many characters. We are already like, we all want this to be every Legends to canon pipe dream we have, right? There's too many things this show is doing, and it's already shown us in the first 3 episodes that it's more grounded than we kind of all had theorized or hoped, in ways. But I'm glad for that. Like, it's not the entire Thrawn trilogy in 8 episodes. It's not it's not the Rebels season 5 really, because it's mostly focused on Sabine and Ahsoka. Like, this is a Sabine and Ahsoka show with a parallel dynamic with Baylan and Shin, and we're going to get to Thrawn eventually. And I think I still hold to the fact that I think we'll see Thrawn either by next episode or beginning of episode 5. I think they wouldn't show him in the trailer without him actually being a significant part of the show. They would have taken more of like the Ahsoka and Mandalorian approach, where they didn't show her in any marketing, and then she shows up in the show, even though we had all heard she was in it. So anyway, that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, I wouldn't want it to be Starkiller. Too little time. I wouldn't want it to be some other Jedi character or Sith character or Legends acolyte that needs more time to develop. Like, I feel like doing that kind of wastes the potential. Even if we went back and had, like, even if we had Force Unleashed reboot like ready to launch and we don't know about it, and you announce Starkiller here, it would lose a little bit of its prevalence if he dies, right? And unless they're setting him up to be like the main villain of the movie, but I doubt it. But anyway, let's move on now. We focused on that question for a while, but great question. Keep sending those in, everybody. We will be on here for probably about another 45 minutes. So if you want to get your question in, send it in now. So yeah, to piggyback off of what you were saying, Funky Monkey sent in the next one. How many more seasons do you think will lead up to the Mandoverse movie? That's a tough question. We know at least one season of The Mandalorian will be out for sure. Season 4 will be coming. Skeleton Crew is coming supposedly this year, probably not. And that's all we have announced. Sanak, do you have any ideas here for how many seasons you think we'll see? And maybe Funky Monkey might specifically be talking about Ahsoka.
Well, if you're talking about Ahsoka specifically, I think there's enough for one. It feels like these first 4 episodes are Star Wars Galaxy. Next 4 are majority in the other galaxy. That's the New Beyond, the different, the pathway to Peridia or whatever they called it. It's going to be something strange and unique. It's going to be a place where things that we just don't expect to see in Star Wars are going to happen, and that's kind of how I feel about that. And I don't know if 4 episodes is enough to like really fully sink us into it. And if it's only going to be there for like 3 episodes and then we come back to the galaxy, I kind of feel a little miffed, because I think it'd be very interesting to keep things in a different galaxy. And it opens up possibilities for the sequels. I also really do believe that now with the exploration of extragalactic lanes and Huyang saying like, yeah, there used to be like records of all this stuff, right?
Right.
It's pumping up into my ideas of, I know that's not what you asked Funky Monkey, but of like my ideas of like, oh yeah, there was truly like a black plague and dark ages for the galaxy. And yeah, maybe back in their cotton or something, they were able to, or came from a different galaxy and then invaded Star Wars. That is very cool, and it also shrinks the timeline in a really cool way for me compared to what we got in Legends 2. If you're gonna open up this, then you also have the sequels, and you're like, oh, Mr. Filoni has a way of letting Ahsoka survive well past her expected expiration date. So you know,
Yeah.
I can totally see him be like, I'm gonna leave her there after the events of whatever my movie is for a couple years, and maybe that's where she retires, and then you hear her voice in episode 9. Like there's all those possibilities. But to get back to it, I just think we're gonna have to spend way more time with this new Beyond, at least as part of this new galaxy, to let it carry weight, let it have some like real significance to the story, an entirely new environment that Star Wars fans who can get a taste of it in these seasons of shows and touch points on it don't have necessarily every answer, every expectation for the movie. They'll come and be like, this place is weird, I'm expecting whatever to happen here to be different. Like I truly think that's how we're gonna have to treat this place. um so yeah, another Ahsoka season specifically to give us like another perspective of the Path to Peridia and what that means. I mean, obviously, I feel like if Ezra and Thrawn are there, there's going to be like a lot of things they've done to keep things going, right? And if there's any like double agent work by Ezra, maybe he's got his own like militia, his own people, and he's created maybe like had some natives that he's like really helped connected with his Melu Ron stories or something, and became like Force adepts or something. There's a lot of possibilities with just what's happening here in the story and the future of it. So another season for Ahsoka, definitely another season for Mando, because obviously he's going to be hunting down Imperial. So I'd like to see him, really set the stage for which Imperial warlords are consolidated by Thrawn or escape into and avoid this whole conflict itself. Who switches to the Republic. This can be some very cool things. That still lets him be a main protagonist and hunt down those necessary, but also play a role in bringing back some. And I think that'd be very important to setting the stage for what Thrawn ultimately has. Does he come in weakened by some random dude in a helmet with some green little like toad running around? And I feel like Thrawn would be very upset and very confused, because he'd be like, is that Yoda or something? Regardless, he'd be put in a worse situation. Skeleton Crew, obviously, I think that's only a 1 episode thing. I don't know if there's enough for 2. I'd love to, because it feels like it's supposed to be like Stranger
Season,
Things. Yeah.
you said
Yeah.
1 episode.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, one season.
I
One
was like,
season.
wait, did we hear something that it was only like a big like movie episode?
Yeah, no, they just swapped places with a droid story as a full season as opposed to Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
No, yeah, 1 season of that for sure. If they really want to play this whole Stranger Things in space thing, then maybe they push through another 1 or 2. So let's say max out 3 and finish basically the story and prepare these characters for the New Republic movie, whoever comes out of the shows. 3 there, 1 Mando, 1 Ahsoka. 5, I think 5 seasons of shows before everything that goes on with the New Republic movie is enough. And I think it's with the delays, with the strikes and everything, I think we can fit that in and still be able to do like a Lando show or like another animated show to fill in those gaps. I know Iger has said like, we're gonna slow down, and Feige's like, yeah, we're gonna like pull back on the shows and special features and presentations and all that. And a lot of people are like, it's not going to affect Star Wars. I think you're mostly right, but I can definitely see like a season be chopped and pushed into another like some plot element there for the characters of that
Right.
series to deal with. So yeah, and when you have Acolyte and everything building out past that, yeah, I think 5 is really as tops we can do in this New Republic era, when they're still also jumping in original into High Republic and all these different things. So
Right.
5 would be my final answer.
Yeah, I think that's pretty optimistic too, because I think right now, from what we've heard, unless this is just promo speak, but even before the actor strike, Rosario Dawson was campaigning for season 2 of Ahsoka. She's like, I want season 2, but it wasn't happening. And so I feel like with the way Filoni would have structured his scripts, it would have been 1 season of Ahsoka, whatever ideas Favreau's got for season 4 of Mando, whatever ideas are going on for Book of Boba Fett season 2, Skeleton Crew. But like, I feel like he's focused mostly on tying in those characters into his movie, but not really. His movie's going to focus on that effects of Ahsoka. And I feel like that's why Disney's pumped so much money into marketing Ahsoka, not just because they don't have actors to promote, but because like most of these actors, right? Natasha Liu Bordizzo is not a household name. She's done a great job as Sabine, but she doesn't like, her promotion isn't going to really get this film or the show where it it's going, right? Even Rosario Dawson is not an A-lister. She's a big to us, the Star Wars fans, but she's not like the promotion they've done has all been like, we want people to understand this is an important story because it connects to the Skywalkers, because Ahsoka is basically part of that family through Anakin. And I feel like that's all been because this follow-up to it is probably the movie, and they want that to do well. And maybe they're a little concerned about whether those fans will definitely transition over into what Filoni's done. I think they will. I think because the show is ultimately going to be quite good, I think. But I personally see only like 3 more. I think Boba Fett, whenever that gets announced that possibly could happen, might be the last part. But I think Skeleton Crew either this year, beginning of next year, and then Mando season 4 probably at best end of 2024, beginning of 2025, and with this movie coming out in 2026, maybe Boba Fett in 25, and we could see a season of Ahsoka, especially if this does really well. They could fast track it, but I don't know. I'm leaning towards about 3, or 4, including this season, if you want to do that.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
But all right, we'll move on. We know we got a backlog here, so we'll try to keep going. Travis, I think we kind of answered your question about Galen Marrok, so we'll skip to your next one. Weird observation, that's a huge stretch, but Marrok's mask looks like Ray Park's Snake Eyes mask in G.I. Joe, Sam Witwer's character, where a mask referencing another Ray Park character is very Filoni. That would be a cool Easter egg for sure, and very much so. Like Sam Witwer, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe was listed in the stunt performance category in the credits. So he could just be doing the stunts for Marrok. Like he could be just in the suit, right? Like a David Prowse with Darth Vader. And then when we get revealed who the character is, it might not be Sam Witwer, so we'll see. But that would be a cool Easter egg. I definitely think that would be fun. Travis also says if it's someone we know, it probably won't be someone huge. Biggest I could see is Lex Bonteri. What's always annoying is when people speculate who a character is when they have a name already. Well, Lux would be a huge jump because he wasn't Force sensitive, and definitely not like on the Inquisitor track. But because he already hated he wasn't a fan of the Republic, I don't think he would be a big fan of the Empire. But
isn't he like a senator on Onderon around like the Imperial era too? So that's
yeah.
a very strange career diversion if that were to happen.
I could see him being in the show, but I don't know about Marrok. But I kind of agree with you that we get so obsessed in today's world and culture on YouTube and on social media in general about trying to speculate and figure out who this is before everybody else does, that we don't really like sit back and enjoy the show. So when it's nobody, when it's just Marrok, we're all like, oh, that's it. Like we prime ourselves for this type of stuff. And, Sanak and I love to speculate about this, but I don't think neither of us really like hold tight to some prediction and like it has to happen this way or I hate the show. No, like that's not reality.
No.
So we're kind of with you there, Travis. But it's fun to speculate. I think it's very fun. I would say in defense of everybody who likes to speculate, because we like to speculate, it is very fun to speculate, but we can't be married to our speculations.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I did watch that G.I. Joe movie, so it did pop into my mind right away. I just don't want it to be. I feels like if there's an obvious red herring in this episode, maybe it's this even more so than like, does Sabine have the Force or not? Right? I would love for Marrok to just be his own dude, right? Like cool voice, cool suit of armor, aged, all right, representative for another time when these were like the officially allowed dark side users besides Darth Vader, right, in the galaxy. And to be like the last of his kind, I think can be its own very interesting story. I just don't want to take that away from him. I definitely see Filoni screwing with someone's mind here, kind of playing what Favreau and everyone have done with some of their promo work. Now that he has his own show and his own experience on his belt, yeah, sure. I can see that being like a quick diversion, and that'd be fine for me. I'd love to see thousands of channels scream in agony as if suddenly, all their lives burst out because they hate the show now because of the prediction. I'd love to see that personally, because this is a show that's so unexpected. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 4 episodes. Predicting for any Star Wars shows or any Disney shows in general past the first 3 episodes is kind of silly, right? So we love to do it, but we know, like Liam said, we don't hold fast to it. And I just think this is like a little fun trick being played here, just because YouTubers, of course, will connect those dots because it just feels so obvious. But it's not like we haven't already seen like a mask with filters already in this episode too, right? It's like they could just be that he's more very Japanese samurai Ronin inspired, right? As opposed to, right, this is Snake Eyes, guys. This is a rape park. Oh yes, like I love if something were to happen like that with some very cool interplay between history of Star Wars and people's actors' careers and all that, because it happens in other films and shows. I just don't think it's necessary, and I think again, making anyone that important, but being established as like the 3rd most important, if not 4th most important dark side user in a room, I don't really want to shift the scales here unless it's a secret agent or something, and I don't think it'd be Ezra either, because I think it's great to see him away and changed and fresh and new instead of he's just succumbed to the dark side when we've already seen that. So I cannot see that connection. I'm sorry, but it's just that's the thing. Like you'd expect us YouTubers maybe to be like, oh yeah, like that's such a cool thing, and it is cool. I just think it's not that important.
Yeah, that's fair. Ike about reptiles says, "Hello, do you watch Fred the Jedi? He is awesome." I've never watched Fred the Jedi. Have you, Sanak?
Haven't heard the name, no, but
Okay,
apparently
we'll have
awesome
to
tier
check it
list.
out.
Okay, yeah.
We'll have to check Fred the Jedi out. MCT Consortium, I think, replying to your response about Knights of the Ren, says, "Why cover his face then?" in reference to Marrok. And there's a lot of other characters who have masks besides the Knights of Ren. But anyway, we'll move on to Arya. The story is more about Sabine accepting not being force sensitive. Chances of her being it are slim to none. She gets abused by Huyang, while Ahsoka supports her journey to accept herself. And I think you're on the right track, Arya. I do. I think there could be that fine line again about like the balance of, like Ahsoka says in this episode, the force flows through everyone. It just natural or natural talent or hard work can get you a little closer to it. So we can see whether Sabine is able to tap into some type of force sensitivity, but I don't think. I think Dave Filoni has a big enough grasp on the Star Wars universe to not take Sabine from never even thought about herself being force sensitive to all of a sudden, like, boom, she is the most powerful Mandalorian Jedi who's ever existed. Forget Tar Vizsla, forget Ezra, forget everybody else who we've seen who can power scale. Forget even Ahsoka. She's just the most powerful. Like, I agree. We're not going to go there, but I think we could see a bit of her skills refined and enhanced by attempting to connect to the Force.
Yes, I agree with your first sentence. I don't know if I fully agree with the second one. I don't think Hu Ying's abusing her. I just think that him and Sabine have a very, like, take big digs at each other, call it banter sort of thing. She's so far losing it, but I also think she's a little bit out of, like out of practice, not just the Force, but also being in this dynamic, right? I look at it more like that. Hu Yang's a droid. You can just turn him off if you really can't deal with him, right? I don't think Sabine would be like, Ahsoka, he's been like, saying all these nasty things about me. And Ahsoka's like, oh, but I'm not going to turn him off. You just got to deal with it. I don't think anyone in the Star Wars universe is willing to listen to droids making fun or complaining. We've seen plenty of times C-3PO be shut down. So I don't see that. I do agree that Ahsoka is maybe supporting her to accept herself. When you say accept, I hope you're meaning more of like, not, evolving into the next step of her journey where she was at that point before Ezra was gone, before Kanan died and all that. I think in that sense, yes, Ezra and all that coming to her life will naturally, good for good or bad, simplify, the complexity of her trauma and her struggles. But does that necessarily mean that, she's gonna accept herself as like a Jedi that's not a Jedi and all that? No, I just think that she's gonna be a lot more assured of herself once again and have a little bit more of, mentality, some skill set, maybe just the tiniest bit of like force sensitivity to enhance herself. It's more of like Ahsoka just trying to, you know, now that she's learned how to talk to Sabine truly this time and kind of like relax around her, maybe we get to see Ahsoka, push her to be that creative, chaotic artist and find that in the force or that within yourself. I think I see that more than anything else. I just don't know if the Hu Yang role is going to be that important and a reason for her to, you know, it doesn't seem like a reason for her to be like, oh, hey, Hu. Yeah, she says hi to him first before she says to Ahsoka, which I think is pretty important. That means that she probably spent a lot of time with him, even more so than Ahsoka when there is downtime and all that. So I think they're fine. I just think they're good friends, and right now he's just on top because he stayed the same. He's done whatever Ahsoka's asked of her. He's stayed true to Jedi principles. She hasn't.
Yeah, he's the one that's there at her hospital bed too when Ahsoka disappears
Yeah.
on a mission. So they seem to have a strong relationship together. I'd love to see that backstory too here in the future. But yeah, let's move on to the next one. MCT Consortium says, agree too much with the mask and the voice to not be someone meaningful, I think. And then follows it up with, if it's too much of a deep cut, only us big nerds get it. I agree that, like, if you're referencing like Star Killer being a deep cut to 99% of the audience, I kind of agree in that sense. And like, that's where I get concerned that it is Star Killer, and just to name drop and be like, oh, the fans will get excited. But like, sometimes there's characters that are too big to, I mentioned this in past videos when I've talked about Mara Jade, like sometimes there's just characters who are too big to name drop, and that's it. Like, you kind of have to, if you're going to name drop them, you have to fulfill that promise, right? Like, I feel like they took a little bit of that Cad Bane approach in Book of Boba Fett. And, for 99% of the audience, they're like, oh, who's this cool dude who just showed up and talks like a Western and all that type of stuff. But then when you kill him in the final episode, like all of us who have grown up with him for 12 years, are like, what? Like, that's our big reveal of Cad Bane, is he dies in like 30 minutes of TV. So for me, that's what I worry about with a character like Marrok, unless it is some huge twist. Like, the only twist I can see Marrok carrying into next season of Ahsoka or the film is him being Ezra. Other than that, like, I can't really see a twist for Marrok where he survives past this season because he's not really much of a character right now, right? So if it was to be a reveal, excuse me, if it was to be a reveal, that reveal would happen that would segue him into being a big character for the second half of the show, and then ultimately kind of become somebody important. But if that doesn't happen, I think Star Killer is just it would be a wasted opportunity for Star Killer. Says Kathleen and Ray for the win. And then says another Ray movie. I'm not sure if that's sarcasm or not. Probably is. But I would say we are both excited for the Ray movie. I think as Star Wars fans here, and I'll let Sanak follow up to this as well, the approach we've taken with this channel is one that is more optimistic. But I think in general, things that we don't like across any of the movies or shows, right, with current canon and previously with Legends, because that was a continuity. Even if George ignored a lot of stuff, it was a continuity. Things we like and dislike, we just have to kind of accept them, and we have to make them better. And so I personally am very excited for another Rey movie, because the story can get better. And I think a strong focus on that character, really developing who she is, what she becomes, it can make her way more interesting. It can make that side of the Star Wars universe way better, just like we're kind of doing in the lead up to it in these shows in the New Republic era and books and all that type of stuff. the finale to The Rise of Skywalker was one that left a lot of people wanting, and I would say I'm kind of down that middle to the negative side a little bit, where I don't love how like cleanly this entire gigantic new plot they introduced in The Rise of Skywalker wraps up. I think it should have had more story, or you should have introduced it earlier in the
Not
trilogy.
a freaking
But
Fortnite reveal either. That
yeah,
Palpatine, I always forget it, and then it hits me like a
yeah,
shockwave. Yeah.
yeah. Poe played Fortnite, so that's how he knew how Palpatine returned. Um, but anyway, yeah, there's things that are left to be desired about the sequels, just like there are every Star Wars movie for the most part, except like Empire Strikes Back. So uh, I'm excited for more Rey because it can only get better.
Yeah, no, I mean, even if you say, another Ray movie sarcastically, I'm down. I mean, there's so much to say about their story that it's left unresolved because of the switch between JJ to Ryan to JJ. And frankly, Iger screwed that up too by not giving JJ the time that he needed. I don't think he would have made anything significantly better. I think he did some pretty incredible things with the lore and all that. Just, to wrap it up nicely, to really introduce it, that needed more time, that needed more complexity, that needed like some initiative to like bring into like maybe the Star Wars Allegiance comics or something, right? And it's just not there. So Rey gets a lot of great development. That is that Daisy Ridley's best film in the trilogy. She's absolutely killing it as an actress. So if you hate her or dislike her, that's just not really what we feel on this channel. We really do like her. We just think that she's at the start of her story. And she's done the things to, ensure the peace of the Skywalkers. Then we have a 15-year jump. The Skywalkers, entrusted her to be like a Skywalker, and at least that's what she believes when she sees Luke and Leia smiling at her on Tatooine, right? So what does it mean to uphold that legacy without having that blood connection? What does it mean to have Ben Solo transfer his whole essence into her? I mean, if you're telling me I can get another Ray movie because I'll get like 20 minutes of Adam Driver, I'm down. I want to see Ben Solo, especially redeemed and still facing consequence. That's one thing that I don't really love about his death. Vader, you can say that, yeah, especially at the end of the trilogy, looking back, you'd be like, yeah, maybe that was just like, just a little too convenient for him. And he's just a sad guy, and that's what they like built off of. But George went back and changed it to a tragedy with him as like a central character, which he wasn't always, right? So we can do very meaningful things here too with Ray. She can have her own trilogy, or a show into a TV show, or something, movie into a TV show, into like, another movie or something like that. I would absolutely clamor for it because I think her story deserves to have more, and I think Finn deserves to have more. He can be, if we only get two like Ray movies, right? If the in between is a Finn led show, and we get to have him be like a co lead in the second sequel Ray film, great. I would love that. I absolutely want these characters who are 21, 22 to grow and evolve, right? I don't think anyone's look at Luke in Legends and say he's the greatest character ever after episode 6 because of his power. No, we say it's because of what he, sacrificed, what he stood up for. But Legends fans will tell you, oh, it's because he's got he can even do Force Lightning because he's so good and all that. He's like a conduit to the politics and the powers of the galaxy that if he moves and does something, everyone has to react. You can say that, but that's what years of development, and Ray needs that. I mean, if it means we have to go back again and fill out another 15 years, yeah, be ready for that. But I'm positive by using it as like a soft reset for the characters and to push them to where they all should have been. If we had, a 3-hour movie, if we had, something in between 7 and 8, then yeah, I'd love that. Honestly, I think Kathleen would love that too. If she's gonna be championing Rey as her Jedi, as everyone online who loves or hate her says, why wouldn't you take that leap? And that's what they're doing right now. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy to see more Rey movies. I love Star Wars. Seeing Rey only makes me happy.
Well said. I'm excited for the future. I think the tagline or subtitle "New Jedi Order" is awesome. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see how that is all done, and it really can expand the lore and the universe to something that the sequels we existed in a time when they came out of prequel hate, and people don't want to acknowledge that, but we did, and that's why we got the very safe Force Awakens, which I love, and I think most of us did when it came out. And then the jarring kind of shift to a very different movie with The Last Jedi that has its own merits. And then The Rise of Skywalker was patchwork because of director changes and actor deaths and all those types of stuff that really affected the film. But in general, I think the sequels didn't really push the boundaries for lore until The Rise of Skywalker, until Ryan Johnson's idea with the Force dyad, and then continuing and building off of that into Sith Eternal and all this stuff in The Rise of Skywalker. That's when we started to really get lore out of the sequels, and I'm excited for New Jedi Order to try to push that even further. Arya says people just won't won't accept that it's just an Inquisitor hired because he's a mercenary. That's it. So yeah, I think there's dissenting opinions in the comments about Marrok. We've gone on a lot about Marrok, so I think I might glance over that one a bit. Arya, sorry, but I think both opinions are valid right now because we're only 3 episodes in. But I don't think it's going to be some crazy huge reveal unless it's that reveal, like it being Ezra, is switched to maybe being a clone or some type of like twist or misdirect. Travis Mitchell, do you guys think Marrok could be a young Gideon clone? That whole storyline was built up too long to have ended like it did. Then also says the idea of a separate galaxy. Okay, we'll get to that question after. Sonic, what do you think? Gideon clone?
No, I mean, I think we also have to consider that it appears to be at least that Ahsoka's events and Mando season 3 events are almost happening closely in parallel. I don't think it's happening after that, because then why wouldn't Sabine have been, like willing to go at least hear out the call to the Mandalore pursuit, right? To free that planet, or at least have like a communicate with Fen Rao or something, because that's for sure something Filoni would do, right? But no, so I think these stories are just happening parallel in a way, so that's probably why we haven't seen any like reference to shiny metal dude and crazy green toad doing things in the galaxy, right? Just it's not happening. It's not important to the story, and
True.
I don't think Gideon's clones at the end, which honestly feel like a little bit of a cop out after feeling like it was like maybe the start of Proto Snoke in season 2, and then finding out it's just for him, right? And then having it destroyed. Yeah, it'd be cool if it continues. It's a very Legends thing to say. Um, I just would be shocked that even a Gideon in his young prime physically, and flash trained to use the lightsaber or whatever, chooses to wear this aged, very like severe design on him instead of something flashy and glossy like Gideon really wants, and more of like a power armor that we see at the end of season 3 of Mando, when he just take a stockpile and become like essentially like what all these Mandalorians who use lightsabers are, they a walking shield and a weapon, right? I don't see him choosing to be this type of character, even if he's brainwashed, even if he doesn't know who he is, because it'd be very unfortunate if some random guy who more than likely doesn't have the Force, and a key point of it, his work with the midichlorians appeared to be that he was trying to give himself the Force through that. If someone like that succeeded post-mortem, and then he's the number 4 person in the room, it's like, well, great, that's what you've done. And it also makes everything that his effect of his character, how powerful he is what he can do to our heroes, feel cheap if he's suddenly in the room as a younger version, and new characters are all so much more powerful, able to do things. That's I just don't see that. It feels a little it feels a little harsh to then undermine a show that you just worked on with the guy who helped you become a very strong live action director in Favreau. So separate the two into being able to lead their own shows, but have synergy still, not like upending stuff. Wouldn't that be the same kind of problem that we had than with people comparing Ryan and JJ for having two totally different takes on Star Wars when it should have been unified. Right? I don't think in any world we'd have Mando season 3 be undermined by the choices of like the third episode of Ahsoka and less than 6 months. It feels a little too much of a stretch to make Gideon be that guy.
Yeah, I don't really see it. It's a good idea, Travis, because it would connect this whole thing. I feel like the Gideon clone thing was one of the biggest letdowns generally across the Mandalorian story, for me personally, because I still don't buy that the creature we saw in the tank in Mandalorian season 2 isn't Proto Snoke, but because of the music and all that. But in general, like I could see Gideon. He seems to kind of be somebody who's, well, he's very egotistical, but he could have hijacked Thrawn's plan or Palpatine's plan or some other higher up Imperial who's on the Shadow Council. Like he could have just kind of stolen that for himself, and taken some of the blood of Grogu that was removed and kept it for himself in his own experiments. So we'll see where that plotline goes. I don't think we're done with it. I don't think we're done with Gideon completely either, because he's kind of our main tie back to the Imperials that we have in that show. But I do think Ahsoka is a little too quick to pull on that. Like I don't think Ahsoka's really going to connect to the Mandalorian at all, besides maybe a quick cameo or something. But the way this story is started, I don't really see even a cameo for the Mandalorian being in this show, unless it's very much so right at the end. Travis also says the idea of a separate galaxy where the Mando characters are fighting a battle as significant as the First Order clears up a lot of potential issues. It does if it's a long plan, for the emergence of the First Order. And it's a war being fought by these characters over a long time and they lose kind of thing. But I also feel like, Leia is aware of the First Order about 4 or 5 years before episode 7. So the First Order start to creep in. I don't really have an issue with the early stages of the First Order. Like it is the hubris of the New Republic that causes the First Order's rise. And Leia sees that and tries to stop it, but nobody wants to listen to her. And I think without strong leadership in the New Republic, we get the typical idea of Star Wars bureaucracy starting to turn its wheels, and the ineffectiveness of the system that George is very passionate about. And I think we see that in the early days of the sequels, especially in novels like Bloodline. So I personally don't have any problems with First Order. Like I think it can exist in the unknown regions and just build by itself without anybody fighting it. Like I feel like if the Rebels characters is kind of who I assume you mean by Mando characters, the Rebels characters and then the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan go out and discover the First Order and yet they don't defeat them, that must mean they died or were defeated themselves, right? So that would be kind of a tragic end to these characters. I don't know. It'd be interesting. Any thoughts there, Sanak?
I mean, I agree. I don't think it's they die and then on the final stand, the final person does a Krypton move with Superman and sends him to, sends the information to the galaxy. I think if you're doing anything with them, you can keep them there for a long time, keep them disconnected, make it unable that they're able to come back, maybe destroy whatever knowledge of the pathway there is. Yeah, maybe you do that, lock them in there, and then they have to live their life there. It's a very easy out for Filoni and also allows him to have an even bigger sandbox than he's ever had. Sure, I do not think it can't happen. I just don't know if I really want that, because then you're bringing out a lot of cool characters that could, have to begin having a little bit more of a depressing kind of storyline of maybe the Mandalorians just decided to leave the galaxy to go to a different one, right? If this is what opens up the opportunities, and they don't want to deal with the Jedi until they find out this new prophecy or whatever tells them when they can finally become powerful or something. Yeah, you can spin all these different tales and separate out all these characters, but I'm honestly more interested in how you can only further increase the hubris of the New Republic by having a lot of these potential threats and allies kind of disappear and just make it seem like the galaxy is just weaker now, right? And that's why everything is safe. I want the New Republic to feel kind of that way. Like, oh, we have our people and they're definitely still strong enough to handle all our enemies because they've been knocked out by all these guys who have also weakened themselves, right? And now we're just the only simplified ruling power in the galaxy. I could see that. I feel like that's the more Saturn depressing version of it, but that is also the one that kind of the sequel trilogy is kind of setting up. If all of our biggest heroes were in a different galaxy and they couldn't find a way to communicate through the Force or something to someone, to like a Luke or a Leia, that like, hey, we're trapped, the First Order's coming, or like some like final message through the Force. I don't see that. I think that's just a little too sad and depressing if they, are just kept. I don't get me wrong. I think it's a great idea to make a lot of story happen there. I don't know if that should ever just become like, well, like the new playground that we're not going to touch unless Filoni wants to, guide whoever his successor is or someone else to jump into that and have their own version of Star Wars. I think that just takes away from what's so unique about the Star Wars galaxy. It's the dynamics, it's aliens, and I'm sure we're going to see some cool things there, but I don't see, and I don't really want to see, something like that happen. Now, if you're telling me like, when Thrawn's defeated and Rey Sloane takes his place, and then she like, starts a war and like takes them down when they're weaker and traps them in a different galaxy, all right, that could be something cool. Bringing in another very important Grand Admiral to actually be the one to finish the job, to actually, ensure the First Order's kept secret or hidden. Yeah, sure. I'd like that if and you knock out a lot of big heroes that way, cool. I just don't know if I'd want that to become, hey, here's an avenue for like 100 years of stories and then also backstory about things happening parallel with the Star Wars movies and all that. It's just too unwieldy at this point in what we know about creating Star Wars stories, right? We need a lot more budget to be able to handle two galaxies. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, it would help out with the idea of Star Wars. We all want Star Wars to get bigger, right? Like that's been a complaint about Star Wars forever, that the galaxy is a massive place, and the fact that we have multiple galaxies makes it even bigger. To focus on just one group of people or controlling everything is kind of simplifying and shrinking the galaxy. But by making these characters kind of exist in an alternate galaxy, an alternate kind of time and space with relativity and all that, we could give them a fight against something like the Grisks that ultimately plays maybe into the Rey film. They don't even really know the First Order is out there, right? Like Thrawn's designs could be bigger than the Empire, and that's what we kind of all us Thrawn fans really hope is the case. Like the Empire, rallying all these people is a means to an end for Thrawn as he continues to fight the bigger threat out there, whether that be the Grisks, like Zahn sets up in his Ascendancy trilogy, or the Yuzan Vong, who could be even bigger than the Grisks, depending on whether we want to bring them back, type of thing. Like I think there's plenty of room, and I think it's a really cool idea to have these separate galaxies. It leads us into the idea of having a bunch of different types of characters all existing at the same time without canon problems. But I don't think the First Order necessarily needs to be a part of that. Like, I feel like that's a separate thing. That's the traditional sense of the Empire. Maybe all of the Imperial Remnant stuff is used up here at the end of Thrawn's campaign and what he's trying to do. But as Ahsoka on the back of Ezra is convincing, gets these Rebels characters, somebody who's a bit more jaded from war, like Hera, gets those people willing to fight into the other galaxy to defend against that threat, and then all that plays into the Rey movie. It would be a brilliant way to connect the two. I've talked about in a lot of past videos about there's going to be probably connection between the two of them, because not only is Thrawn in Star Wars lore, not really when the books came out, but in Star Wars lore, very important to the story of the New Jedi Order and the Chiss ascendancy and all of that. But they're coming out in the same year as of now, both movies. So it would be a good way to connect everything. So great question there. MCT Consortium says, if Thrawn and Ezra were sent to a different time in a different galaxy, are they literally in a galaxy a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? That could be what Filoni's trying to play at. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the line with like when Morgan is saying in the last episode, an ancient race or like my ancient ancestors long ago, like or whoever created this mechanism, long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Filoni's cheeky. He loves that sort of thing.
And he's good. He's been better at the subtlety in the last few years too. Travis also says Filoni already hinted at Ahsoka being alive in episode 9, reasoning she didn't have to be dead to speak through the Force. Well, she doesn't have to be, and I think that would still make sense. She could still connect to Rey, maybe from beyond, beyond the galaxy. At this point, I've given up trying to predict when Filoni's going to kill Ahsoka. Travis, I think your idea and the idea in general is a great one. I just think the First Order doesn't really not have anything necessarily to do with it, but I think I would love to see these characters all go and fight the bigger fight and then see them mostly all return, like an older Sabine, an older Ezra, if Ahsoka's in it, a really old Ahsoka, and a Jason Syndulla, who we now have seen as a kid and was brought into live action, really didn't have to be brought in, unless he's given a big role in this. But just him introducing him as a kid now sets the stage for, if you bring him in as a main character in Rey's New Jedi Order movie, now people are familiar and have seen him in live action. So all that I think is cool. Travis also says I could see separate seasons for major characters, like a Thrawn season or an Ezra season. So do you mean like mini series, like we get the Ahsoka mini series type thing? This is only a 1 season show, a 1 season mini series, and we get a Thrawn mini series, we get an Ezra mini series. It'd be cool. I feel like Thrawn and Ezra would be a joint thing. Like I feel like their story is intertwined. This show so far has not led us to believe anything else. But that would be a cool like final build up to the film, is like a secret Thrawn Ezra series, kind of follow-up sequel to Ahsoka, that's the second part of a trilogy that leads up to the final film that caps everything. That would be interesting. And we could have time for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need seasons worth. I kind of prefer Star Wars characters being players to a big story. Why the Thrawn trilogy works isn't because Thrawn is doing everything. He kind of pulls at something. Some things work out how I expect. Some things are unexpected. He, retracts and then he changes his plan and then readjusts. That's kind of what I love about that character. Giving him like a solo series and then having him be the lead, and then I don't know. He's not interesting without the people that he, interacts with, without the people he's fighting, without the people he's trying to win the support of. I don't know if I could see another season. I mean, Ahsoka so far in the show has given up a lot of screen time to the villains, a lot of screen time to Sabine. It'll ultimately be her show. I'm sure that's what you mean about a Thrawn and Ezra combined or separate. I just think we don't need that. Some things can be. Star Wars is a franchise that would be willing to take that story and like all the backstory and be like, let's make this an animated film or something. Put on Disney Plus. All right, instead of just the season. Season's a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of commitment. So I just see them putting as much together. Like honestly, I could see them take Mando season 4 and then fit in like an entire arc dedicated to Boba and what he's doing at this time, right? To connect things and put them together and still have that story continue to be advanced. If you're saying like the story is like called like a new beyond and we get to see backstory of everything that happened between episode just before episode 4 at the Rebels finale till where we are now, cool. But then I also feel like we're diminishing how cool it is to have Thrawn be a character perfectly suited for like a novel more than even a TV show.
Yeah,
like Liam said,
It's
Yeah,
the
the
books.
books are where we love these characters. We want to see them, but the love is from those things in the first place.
I'd be shocked if we don't get any books about the time between Rebels and Ahsoka for Thrawn.
Right.
Whether Ezra's a part of that or not, I'd be shocked if that's not already done. Like Timothy Zahn, the guy can write so much so fast. Like he has probably already written all 3 of this new trilogy, and
Right.
it will be somehow. It could just be an Ascendancy trilogy sequel that's like about the Ascendancy hunt for Thrawn type of thing. Because I doubt he would leave those characters hanging where he did. Uh, but yeah, I think we could. I think that's a book story, but I would love to see it. I mean, I think Book of Boba Fett proved that anything's possible for like a shadow reveal, right? Like the end of Ahsoka could reveal a Thrawn show, especially if the shot of Thrawn is in episode 7 of this show, and it was just used to show everybody, hey, Thrawn's in it, and you should watch. But we still haven't seen any Ezra in the promotional material, so like I don't think those characters are a major part of this season of show, but their story is, and so could we have shot this show right after? It's possible. The thing though that was like the only thing that's kind of throwing the wrench in that whole idea to me is when we were at Star Wars Celebration last year in May of 2022, and they had just started shooting Ahsoka, like they were a month in. So to have shot all of Ahsoka and shot all of another show in secret would be really surprising at this point in August of 2023 to have finished shooting 2 shows at the same time. I mean, it's possible, but to shot both shows at the same time and to have completely edited Ahsoka and gotten all the VFX and everything done for Ahsoka, it's possible. But if they haven't shot it and it's coming out, that means it will definitely get delayed. So we'll see. I like the idea, but we probably should run through a lot of these quickly. Send in your very last questions if you have them, because we've hit the hour and a half mark, and so we'll stay on here for a few more minutes, finishing answering. Beastmaster XX says, "Have they watched it yet?" I think. Are you referencing us watching the Ahsoka episode? Yes, we've watched it. Travis Mitchell says, I interpret the balance of the Force to also mean normal people have to exist as well. The Force using them as vessels when their willpower is strong enough, like Finn, Sabine, and even Han. Yeah, I think the Finn connection is a good one as well. And we kind of agree. We've talked about Sabine a lot in this stream, so I don't know if we'll follow up on that much more, but
I will say one thing. When you brought up Han Solo and all that, I've always kind of believed, the Force has benefited these sort of people.
right.
But a way for Sabine to like kind of work here with the rules we've established, make him like a Chirrut, where he like I'm one with the Force is with me. Something clearly the Force or luck, whatever it may be, has been in his benefit to help the rebels, right? If that's what it is for Sabine, I would totally be fine with that. That's kind of how I'd love for the Force to be used. I also have a very specific other theory I'm not going to get into, but I wouldn't mind that. That would be very cool if, Sabine just lets herself go. The Force takes over and does what's needed for that one moment, and then she doesn't really have the Force after that. I would love that, actually.
Yeah, it's people channel in different ways. I mean, we've already seen it in the High Republic. Like, people see it as a song or a wave or whatever. Sabine, it can not have to be a power for Sabine. It can be luck like Han. It could be a fighting prowess, or it could just be a feeling like Finn or Leia before Luke trained her. It could be all those things. Arya says, imagine everything we have seen in our galaxy with the daughter and the son. With all of these beings now, imagine what's on another galaxy that Thrawn is at. This is about more than who is Marrok. Well, Arya, I do think, and then you said there's clearly going to be some insane shit happening half of the show. I hope so. I hope you're right that it's insane, that it's big, that it's epic, that it's more than just who is Marrok. I hope you're right, because who is Marrok is a cool idea right now in the scope of the show we have. But if it transforms into Chiss Ascendancy versus Grisk and Yuzan Bong and all these crazy new expansions of the lore, reimaginings of old lore. I could care less about Marrok, but if Marrok is tied to that, so be it too. Like, I don't think we have to exclusively say one or the other, but I like your thinking there, Arya, of let's focus on how epic this show could be. That's something I've been focused on this channel for a long time because I love the Thrawn books. I've read everything Thrawn, and I really want to see a lot of that stuff pulled in because it's so the ascendancy stuff works so well and is so cool, such a breath of fresh air for Star Wars because it's Star Wars in iconography but not Star Wars in style, and like that is really neat to kind of bring into the mainstream, that we can have Star Wars not feel like classic old school Star Wars, but we have enough of that style through the injection of Dave Filoni's relationship to George Lucas, his love of Star Wars iconography, that it can feel Star Wars without really pen and paper being Star Wars. I really like that.
Yeah, not think I could really add there. When you mentioned that son and daughter, yeah, I'd love some crazy Mortis stuff to happen because it's been tied to Ahsoka, right? She literally died and then she got brought back to life because of the daughter. Like that is something so strange we don't talk about. And then we have that whole Mortis stuff in Rebels, and you're like, what is going on? You don't think a third Filoni show wouldn't go into the more crazier, out of this world Star Wars stuff, the more extreme, just almost too hard to comprehend stuff for us. Yes, especially at live action, it would be insane to watch. I think when people want Star Killer to be Marrok, it's like, yeah, who wouldn't if you're a big Legends fan? But there's that Legends mentality of like making everything connected or making everyone important, and yet still wanting the galaxy to be big. You have to make a compromise. You got to let a character be a character and be able to grow on their own. So, yes, this stuff is so unexplored and so big. I agree, Arya. I would love that more so than cool cameo, because I feel like that sort of became the problem a little bit in Mando here and there too. And Mando season 3 didn't use a lot of it, and surprisingly, it got weaker. I would have thought some cameos would have maybe even helped there, but yeah, I agree with you, Arya. That's where I'll
They
put it.
used famous actor cameos instead.
Exactly. Yeah.
with Jack Black and Lizzo.
Who's got her own controversy, so it's like, like, great, it's not even going to be a memorable character. It's a silly, like, a little goofy thing instead of like Bo-Katan showed up, Luke showed
Right.
up. Like, yeah.
What if, so Arya, what if we get the last episode, the Dave Filoni episode of the show is actually directed by George Lucas, and it's the microbiology of the Force that he's been talking about for 10 years. It's finally here. We get the microbiology, all of that. I want to know, like, concretely what the heck is like he talking about? Like what is that something he just made up on the spot? Because I feel like it kind of was, but because he was looking for some type of word to try to trigger the fan base or something, while also trying to continue to like batch the sequels. I don't know, but that would be hilarious if we get a reference to microbiology. Uh, Travis says, I feel like Cad Bane is worth too much to Filoni to not return and be redeemed at some point. I think he's coming back because it's a waste. It's complete waste of the character. Complete
Yeah.
waste. So he's coming back at some point.
The light was flashing, guys. I mean, if they want to, they can let him die, or they can bring him back, because we didn't see it slow down or anything. It's not like an Inception ending, right? So,
We'll see
yeah,
it.
he's coming back. I think so.
We could see a dramatic like Cad Bane crawling to safety, like Boba Fett at the beginning of the show, like crawling on the star, like the Cad Bane's like redone. Robert Rodriguez will probably do that for the next season.
Cad Bane's gonna rule with respect, via his own dying.
Yeah, all it takes is a near-death experience to just completely shift your morals. Okay. Travis also says Cobra Kai took an awful movie like Karate Kid 3, took its characters and plot threads, and made them the foundation for the whole show, and it's great. So I see the sequels the same way. Good example, and it's another good example of ways we can take the bad stuff and when you're a fan of something, just another aside, like when you're a fan of something there's always some little piece of it you like, right? And with time, it's going to age to the point where you can laugh about Jar Jar Binks, even though he was hated for so long, right? Like, there are things that will ultimately be redeemed, and everybody's going to get over them. And I think that's the thing we're going to do with the Rey movies, hopefully. MCT Consortium says, I really think the magic of shared canon is that we're committed for better or worse, and it's about the excitement of how we make that story better. But what happened, happened. A great way to
Oh,
sum it up. I think that is a great way.
that's
You
what the
know,
Clone
like,
Wars is. You can say it's just Lucas wanting to show the war, but it was a patch to the
mhm,
prequels, and it was like an entirely new way of looking at it, right? Yeah, that's
yeah,
how Star Wars has always been. That's the best part about this universe. It can never truly be broken if you try hard enough to fix it.
true. And I think, yeah, it started as an expansion of Star Wars, the Star Wars, the Clone Wars show with deeper characters, and turned into something that was far bigger. I think once George and Dave saw the potential there. So, or maybe, it was always kind of what they had planned, but they had to start with an entry level to Star Wars. So anyway, I think that's a great way to sum it up, because instead of just saying, well, this sucks, let's just retcon it. I think now, for better or worse, like you mentioned, we're stuck with everything. So instead of retconning, we try to find ways to make it better. And that's kind of our approach on this channel in general. We're optimistic. We're trying to find ways to improve things instead of just saying this doesn't exist because we don't like it. It does exist, and we are going to have to fix it if we don't like it. Like that, we're more constructive. So appreciate that, MCT Consortium. Arya says, even Filoni loves and defends the hell out of Rey. Don't tell that to the haters, though. Thank God that Luke LFM didn't bow down to the
Lucasfilm,
horrible
yeah.
Lucasfilm. I think it's LFL, right?
Oh
Didn't
yeah.
bow down to the horrible sequel haters. Um, I I feel like one of the main reasons they didn't bow down was because they have too much money invested in this universe, with theme parks and all that stuff. But I agree that I think the idea of these characters and what they've set up here, the Rise of Skywalker is going to be like always the most controversial double-edged movie that we will ever have in Star Wars, because it's going to have set up so many things that we can expand on, that when you watch it 10 years from now, you could be like, the Rise of Skywalker was genius because it has all these great ideas that we've now turned into incredible stories. But right now it feels so disconnected and choppy and messy. So eventually, we're going to see what happens there. But I'm with you that, succumbing to the haters is usually the wrong business decision. Listening to critiques by
Yes.
people who have genuine criticism is always a good thing, and you should never just blatantly ignore criticism. But drowning out the people who just want to get rid of it because they don't like it and have no basis for their actual criticism is not the right thing to do. So I'm glad we're getting more in that sense.
Yeah, not much else to add there other than I agree. I think they like Ray, money's and all that's been invested, sure, but it'll be interesting to see how The Rise of Skywalker, probably the most corporate meddled Star Wars film in history, will, other than maybe Episode 7, will turn into something that was, forcing two different things to coexist instead of falling through to either JJ or Ryan's, interpretation, or finding a common middle ground, doing something completely different than both and only having elements of the first two films. You can say that it is like, bowing down to the sequel haters and then making that film to just make a Star Wars film that's safe and cool. And then maybe in 15 years we'll be like, yeah, that part of it is safe, but it did really set up some amazing things. And that'll be very interesting. And another testament to how Star Wars will always take what it has and build it out, make it reasonable enough for you to enjoy it, or enough people enjoy it to not make the majority of people hate it. I truly believe that. So agree with your points there. We can move on to Travis. Which character, new or established, you think is likely for a redemption arc this season? Thoughts, Liam?
Well, I think we're already starting with Sabine. Um, I don't know. It's tough because I feel like Ahsoka's gone through most of our arcs. We haven't seen Anakin yet, but I think there's something there. There's like a nice patch that needs to be done here between Anakin and Ahsoka that I think will be perfect for the final redemption of Anakin. And honestly, a lot of Ahsoka's guilt. I think she has a ton of guilt from letting Anakin down. We know that she has that. So I think that's going to be a big focus of the arc. But I think Ezra, whatever happens to Ezra here, I don't know if I'd call it redemption arc, but I think there's something going on with Ezra that's going to be completely change the character. So maybe the opposite of a redemption arc. But yeah, I think those are the main focus. That I'm glad the show's tighter than we thought. Like, and maybe
Yeah.
I guess Shin is like the main theory. That would be the main dark side character. I'd have a bet on that you could see her possibly go light or go or realize the error of her ways. But we haven't gotten into enough of her character to really make a decision on her.
Yeah, I mean, I I want to say Marrok, just to be like, the peaceful end to the last of the Inquisitors, finally finding peace after being, forced into being tortured into like an Inquisitor. As we've seen with the rise of the Red Blade, how they manipulate you, Palpatine, and all that, and then finally like condition you right into that. So maybe that'd be something simple and easy, and kind of an end to that whole introduction from Filoni and Canon, and then close there. I could see it small and grounded with this character, which there's nothing wrong with being a small character in Star Wars, guys. Um, yeah, I see a little bit of the Ezra, like if he gets like a little unbalanced or something, get him back on track. Shin, I think so, but I think with how it's been paced so far in the show, and I've enjoyed the pacing, and I know some people haven't. I just don't know where's like the time to really make it happen unless it's like a big thing about like, when they reach the galaxy, things go wrong and they have to survive together. Maybe that.
Yeah,
Baylan, I can see to a degree, but it's like a redemption and like merciful death. I can see something like that from him. I think
yeah,
he's
like a
not too far
worthy
gone yet, but he
adversary.
needs something. Yeah, exactly. Like he's not too far gone to like respect that, like, his decisions have had finally negative consequences, and others who are more closely tied to the Jedi religion and the Republic of old would not, like Ahsoka, would disagree with him, right? So
Yeah, that
those
would fit
characters,
really
that's
well
about it.
into like
Yeah.
the samurai idea that Filoni's been doing, injecting this stuff with a lot. The Maul Obi-Wan fight also, like Filoni wants to bring that stuff in. Even the music in this episode was very Eastern in a lot of
Yes.
ways. So Kiner is really good at adapting different genres into Star Wars. He started out a little rough in the Clone Wars movie. Every time I watch that, the like guitar riffs during the Battle of Teth is really strange, but he's worked in a lot of really interesting music. And honestly, Kevin Kiner does not get enough credit. He's fantastic. All right, Ricky Gamer, with a nice long thread here. If there was a Star Wars character that you would challenge to a car race, who would it be? I'd have to go against Anakin. Honestly, I need a challenge as the Emperor of the Highway. um,
Obi-Wan versus the Emperor, then Dooku versus the Emperor, win. I need challenge. I'm not gonna race noobs or racers. I race out passion and thrill. Winning just 1%. The whole experience. The other 90 is Russian passion. Ahsoka, you're beloved by the community, but you're a noob compared to the Emperor. Bow down. I'm assuming Emperor of the Highway or Emperor. I mean, I guess
yeah.
both are kind of true. Uh, yes, I guess if I want to race someone for like a fun challenge, I would want to do Han because it's an unpredictable race. I'd like to be able to be with someone who can deal with that, or other Ben Quadrinos or other famous racers or
yeah.
something from pod
Yeah.
racing. That's really all I can pull out of that, Ricky.
I would have said Ben Quadraneros for sure. Like, that would have been so funny. Um, I don't know. I guess Sebulba, you'd really earn your stripes, right? But you'd also
Yeah.
probably die. So that would be a problem. Travis Mitchell throws a low blow in there. I'd race 99. That's
How
a
dare
low
you? How
blow.
dare you? How dare you? He died for his brothers. It's
uh,
too soon to make jokes like that.
but man, yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I mean, yeah, if I wanted to win, I personally would not race against anybody good, because I would not call myself the emperor of the highway, like you, Ricky Gamer. So,
Yeah, we'll leave you to that for sure.
I'll have to think on that. Maybe next stream I can get a nice breakdown for you of all the people I would want to race. Ike about reptiles asking about Fred the Jedi again. Got kicked off before you answered. We have not watched any Fred the Jedi stuff, but we'll have to check Fred the Jedi out sometime. I assume that's a YouTube channel. Otherwise, I don't know what else Fred the Jedi would be. All right, we're gonna wrap up here with the last few questions, everybody. So if you haven't sent them in, probably hold them up until next stream. We're going to get our Republic Commando streams up and running again soon here too. So make sure you can join us there if you want to talk more Ahsoka as well. And then we'll be back next week. MCT Consortium, they said they are not familiar. I'm not sure which thing you're referencing. It's probably while we were talking. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Caleb Richardson, lol. I mean, if a literal rock can use the Force in his own way, I'm sure Sabine can find her place in the will of the Force. Are you referencing Geode?
I don't know
Because
if
I
he's
guess
got the Force, but
he can't. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember if Geode has. If it's hinted at, maybe he got a Force sensitivity.
I think maybe what he's saying more of like is like like Sharut has his own way of connecting the Force. Sabine could have her own way. Maybe the reason why he's like suddenly like next to something or like piloting a ship and you're like, what is happening?
Well, he's
I
also
guess
got
that
like
could be the Force. Yeah.
He's also got like an innate ability to chart paths and stuff as a navigator and a co-pilot.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're talking about. But yeah, I think I agree. I think Sabine's gonna find her path, but I don't think it's gonna be huge power. Travis Mitchell says, I can already see Filoni making your Marrok theory Saruk stickers. That would be funny. That would be Dave Filoni definitely playing into it. Honestly, it could be very Dave Filoni just to create this character with a mask purely so people are speculating about it.
Yes, absolutely agree.
Travis also says Osmortis Jones would be awesome.
Okay, so this is the microbiotic stuff.
Microbiology. Yep.
Okay.
I would love that. Oh man,
hilarious.
I'd love George Lucas to make his own film, one of his experimental films that he's making by himself that only his family is going to see. One of them has to be Osmortis Jones. Caleb Richardson, I could totally see the Rey movie redeeming the prequels if done right. I personally think we need a third season of Resistance to give more depth and meaning to the sequels. In the words of my grandfather, every story has meaning, even ones we don't like. Hey, I think that's a good way to look at it, Caleb. I don't personally know if I need a third season of Resistance, but I'd love a new show to spin out of Resistance and maybe be a little bit higher quality in its storytelling, or maybe a little bit more mature, a little more Rebels-esque, right? Like the Rebels is the perfect example of how to deliver a Disney XD level Star Wars show while also making it accessible to adults. Clone Wars is much more teenage to adult oriented for animation. Rebels is the perfect example, and Resistance definitely goes under that to be definitely targeted towards children and its plot, but also it's not. I think Resistance with its characters and like storytelling could have worked even with a more childlike vibe if it was given material that actually mattered. But since it's not given material that carries any weight into the films themselves, right? It doesn't really like Senator Ziono's first appearance here is pretty much the most important thing Resistance has ever done. So I'd love to see it carried on. I'd love to see a more mature adult Kaz and, some of that stuff start to morph. But I like your idea of every story has meaning, even the ones we don't like. And I'm interested in your idea of how do you think the Rey movie completely redeems the prequels too? That's a long stretch removed in terms of time between the two. I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I wonder if he said prequels meant sequels. Then that definitely makes more sense. The prequels I feel like have been very redeemed in a lot of people's eyes, but it could be cool to still take more of the Force aspects of it, combine the midichlorian stuff, kind of how they've been doing in the Mandoverse era, and making it a little bit more vague. Like, yeah, you could have all these midichlorians, but you're not that strong compared to someone who's truly connected to the Force or something. I could seeing that rebalance could be something cool there. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if third season Resistance, I agree. I like the idea of taking a lot of the details of that, bringing characters from that show as like supporting characters or like characters for different arcs, keeping the animation too. I don't really mind the animation, just put a little bit more money into it. Yeah, I wouldn't mind the look of it. And if it's upgraded, I just don't see season 3 happening, especially with how honestly it did end the show pretty concretely where it is by the end. So yeah, I just don't know if that's the show for real in-depth exploration, which compared to even the Clone Wars, this whole era needs a lot more of.
Yeah, definitely agree. Travis, last question. Yeah, Marrok seems like a character destined to become a hero. Filoni loves doing that with Zuko, Boba, Callus, etc. It could be. I just feel like Callus had a character straight off the bat, right? Like,
Yeah.
Marrok is not a character yet. Like, that's why I feel like it's either going to be a twist. He's going to be used as a plot device for a twist. He's just a simple baddie, or he is, gonna be someone of actual importance that carries on into the future. But that twist has to come here soon, where he's revealed to actually have some sort of character, because right now he's barely spoken, let alone done anything of significance.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
you're welcome, MCT Consortium. Thank you for watching our streams. Appreciate the kind support, and we look forward to next week. Thanks everybody for being a part of this. Oh, Travis, and one last one. All right, this is the last one we're gonna touch on. Very fictiony, but I like the idea of Ben Solo not dying in Exegol, rather being dropped into a Davy Jones locker scenario where he relives the atrocities committed by Skywalkers before returning. And we also definitely both have our theories on Ben coming back to life. Have a video out on the channel about it too. But a couple, but yeah, I kind of like that too. I mean, I've always thought that by transferring his Force essence into Rey, he's kind of imprinted himself onto Rey in a way, like the way your Force essence almost has kind of some type of significance in terms of like the way you exist, right? Like your Force ghost is able to carry your consciousness into the netherworld. Why could his consciousness not be kind of inside Rey? Why could she not hear him? And he's existing in another realm, kind of like you're talking about with Davy Jones' locker, but she's trying to pull him out of that. I like that idea.
I can't say I know what the Davy Jones locker is because I think that's something to do with Pirates of the Caribbean or something, but I just have only seen the first film, so
Yeah, it's like when you are transported to like a God, I'm blanking on the word.
like a purgatory?
Purgatory, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So something maybe like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where we see like the General Zhao still
Mhm.
like walking around and Korra and all. Okay, okay, yeah. I mean that'd be pretty cool too. If that's we've talked at one point microbiotics. We talked about he's still in Ray and you just have he has to, Ray has to like maybe swap out places with him sometimes or something like. There are really cool things you can do here with the concept of him like sacrificing himself, but I don't know if like you're saying right now, if Ben has to come back as Tusken's Anakin's killing an old woman being revealed as well, I don't know about that. I think that's pushing too far. I like the idea of like maybe dealing with his own atrocities now that he's redeemed. Going back to his whole lineage just feels like unnecessary torture for a guy who's already felt the pressure of like the good and the bad, right? So I don't know if I push it that far.
I mean, it could be an interesting little like short film if they wanted to do to kind of dive into Kylo's psychosis. I mean, it's something that I personally, that type of vision into the past of Anakin Skywalker and the Skywalker family would be interesting prior to him even turning into Kylo Ren, like some type of Force vision. Also, and then a kind of redemption look at it, a darker look at it, manipulated by Palpatine and Snoke prior to him turning, and then after he turns from the dark side back to the light, maybe before he comes back and survives, we get the kind of the rosy look at it. that would be interesting. But all right, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for everybody for the questions. This was a great stream. We planned for an hour and a half, went to 2 hours, and that's mostly because all you guys asked great questions. So thank you for joining us. Again, tune back in. It will be most likely around 7-ish Pacific, 10 Eastern every single week, depending on the length of the Ahsoka episode. So we'll post, the lobby early so you can join in and get ready. Bring your questions, bring your comments. We love interacting with all of you. Make sure you're tuning back in. If you haven't liked the video, that really helps us out. Helps us. We had a lot of people in the chat today, and we love talking Star Wars with everybody. So only the likes will give us the ability to reach out to more Star Wars fans. So help us out. Give us a like. If you're not subscribed to us and you're just finding us, please subscribe. We're going to be covering the show the entirety of its runtime. We'll have a bunch of other videos besides like a specific Ahsoka reviews and predictions out, but we will have the review edited from the beginning of this video if you haven't watched it, out tomorrow, and then predictions out on Friday for episode 4. And anything else I'm forgetting? Bracket is up. We have that going on. Best animated characters. If you'd like to vote in that, make your voice heard there. We have some really fun matchups going into the Sweet 16 going for you there. We do have a Patreon and YouTube memberships now. If you'd like to show your support for that, we'd greatly appreciate it, but that is completely up to you. And anything else, comment below and let us know what you thought if you're watching our replay. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you all next time.